Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today, in our ongoing lesson in reality creation, we've been focusing a little bit more on prosperity teachings, so I've gone a little bit deeper into some of what Napoleon Hill teaches. A lot of people talk about Think and Grow Rich as the best book that Napoleon Hill wrote. Some people say Outwitting the Devil, but a secret book that is really amazing is The Law of Success. There's a couple different versions. There's a 16 Laws of Success and The Law of Success. They've been edited differently. You can find them online, and they have different lessons. Each lesson is geared towards providing greater success, wealth, and riches in your life. And a lot of people that I've read about actually were more influenced by The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. This was his first book, and he went a lot deeper on topics like the mastermind, and there's some different chapters that have some different stuff in it that I found to be very powerful, unique teachings. Each of the lessons offer a unique and powerful lesson on the keys to success, wealth, and riches. The discussion of the mastermind is much deeper than it is in the Think and Grow Rich book. There is a chapter on a definite chief aim, self-confidence, the habit of saving, initiative and leadership, imagination, enthusiasm, self-control, the habit of doing more than paid for, pleasing personality, and then accurate thought, concentration, cooperation, failure, tolerance, and the golden rule. Each of these lessons have a different angle on creating realities and finding success in doing so. And each of them can lead you to great riches. Each of them by themselves, but when combined together, they're truly amazing. Now, I considered reading the whole book for an episode, but I think it's better for us to break these up, and they don't have to necessarily be in order. Definitely based on where we are at in the podcast on our journey of understanding the laws of prosperity. One of my favorite chapters in the book is Accurate Thought. Accurate thought is something I have not talked about as much on the podcast. When we are creating in our thinking, it's a different kind of thought. That is creative thought. But we're also evaluating the world around us based on certain principles, and there are certain ways to evaluate your thoughts and those of others that can lead you to greater success. I wanted to read a little bit about what Napoleon Hill says about accurate thought, and we can expand on this discussion today in this general environment of seeming information overload, where we're given information about different topics all the time from the media and different sources and places, and we have to practice accurate thought in maneuvering through this cloudy density where it's constantly the law of confusion all around us. There's contradictions, there's influences. Behind the scenes, you can see what's going on. So it's interesting that Napoleon Hill addressed accurate thought in his first book, but didn't talk about accurate thought in Think and Grow Rich. I think it's really relevant today in our situation, in the world that we live in. So I wanted to introduce the way that he discusses accurate thought and then relate it to what we're talking about. So this is not an entire reading of the chapter, but sort of abridgment and a discussion of this concept of accurate thought. He begins by saying, "It is pardonable to tell your friends by tactful suggestion of your needs, but take care not to ask them outright for assistance if you would retain their friendship. You can do it if you believe you can. This is at one and the same time the most important, the most interesting, and the most difficult to present lesson of the entire course on the law of success. It is important because it deals with a principle which runs through the entire course. It is interesting for the same reason. It is difficult to present for the reason that it will carry the average student far beyond the boundary line of his or her common experiences and into a realm of thought in which they are not accustomed to dwell. Unless you study this lesson with an open mind, you will miss the very keystone to the arch of this course. And without this stone, you can never complete your temple of success. Now, Napoleon Hill refers to the temple of success frequently in the first book and continually gives ways to reach the temple of success. He goes on to say this lesson will bring you a conception of thought which you may carry far above the level to which you have risen by the evolutionary processes to which you have been subjected in the past. And for this reason, you should not be disappointed if at first reading you do not fully understand it. Most of us disbelieve that which we cannot understand, and it is with knowledge of this human tendency in mind that I caution you against closing your mind if you do not grasp all that is in this lesson at the first reading. For thousands of years, men made ships of wood and of nothing else. They used wood because they believed that it was the only substance that would float, but that was because they had not yet advanced far enough in their thinking process to understand the truth that steel will float, and that it is far superior to wood for the building of ships. They did not know that anything could float which was lighter than the amount of water is displaced. And until they learned of this great truth, they went on making ships of wood. Until some 25 years ago, most men thought that only the birds could fly, but now we know that man can not only equal the flying of the birds, but he can excel it. Men did not know, until quite recently, that the great open void known as the air is more alive and more sensitive than anything that is on the earth. They did not know that the spoken word would travel through the ether with the speed of a flash of lightning, without the aid of wires. How could they know this when their minds had not been unfolded sufficiently to enable them to grasp it? The purpose of this lesson is to aid you in so unfolding and expanding your mind that you will be able to think with accuracy, for this unfoldment will open to you a door that leads to all the power you will need in the completing your temple of success. I was conscious of the fact that the majority of the students of this course would feel disappointed if I pointed out to them a roadway to success that leads through other than the doorways of business and finance and industry, for it is a matter of common knowledge that most men want success that is spelled success with dollar signs. Very well. Let those who are satisfied with this standard of success have it, but some there are who will want to go higher up the ladder in search of success which is measured in other than material standards, and it is for their benefit in particular that this and the subsequent lessons of this course are intended. So here Napoleon Hill is pointing out that this goes beyond just dollars and cents. It has a greater relevance on other levels of thought. Hill explains that accurate thought involves two fundamentals, which all who indulge in it must observe. First, to think accurately, you must separate facts from mere information. There is much information available to you that is not based upon facts. Second, you must separate facts into two classes, namely the important and the unimportant, or the relevant and the irrelevant. Only by so doing can you think clearly. All facts which you can use in the attainment of your definite chief aim are important and relevant. Now we go back to previous discussions on other episodes. The definite chief aim was mentioned by Mitch Horowitz in his amazing book, The Definite Chief Aim, which he is invoking Napoleon Hill by the title. This was the key point of the Law of Success book for Napoleon Hill, was the key of focusing on a definite chief aim. one particular thing that rides over all other things. Hill explains that all that you cannot use are unimportant and irrelevant. It is mainly the neglect of some to make this distinction which accounts for the chasm which separates so widely people who appear to have equal ability and who have had equal opportunity. Without going outside of your own circle of acquaintances, you can point to one or more persons who have had no greater opportunity than you have had, and who appear to have no more and perhaps less ability than you, who are achieving far greater success. So it doesn't matter how skilled you are, it doesn't matter where you come from in your circle of acquaintances, you can still find success according to Napoleon Hill. And you wonder why. Search diligently, he says, and you will discover that all such people who have acquired the habit of combining and using the important facts which affect their line of work, far from working harder than you, they are perhaps working less and with greater ease. By virtue of their having learned the secret of separating the important facts from the unimportant, they have provided themselves with a sort of fulcrum and lever with which they can move with their little fingers loads that you cannot budge with the entire weight of your body. The person who forms the habit of directing his attention to the important facts out of which he is constructing his temple of success, thereby provides himself with a power which may be likened to a trip hammer which strikes a 10-ton blow as compared to a tack hammer which strikes a 1-pound blow. If these similes appear to be elementary, you must keep in mind the fact that some of the students of this course have not yet developed the capacity to think in more complicated terms, and to try to force them to do so would be the equivalent of leaving them hopelessly behind. That you may understand the importance of distinguishing between facts and mere information, study that type of man who is guided entirely by that which he hears. The type who is influenced by all the whisperings of the winds of gossip, that accepts without analysis all that he reads in the newspapers and judges others by what their enemies and competitors and contemporaries say about them. Search your circle of acquaintances and pick out one of this type as an example to keep before your mind while we are on this subject. Observe that this man usually begins his conversations with some such terms as, "This, I see by the papers," or "they say." The accurate thinker knows that the newspapers are not always accurate in their reports, and he also knows that what they say usually carries more falsehood than truth. If you have not risen above the "I see by the papers" and the "they say" class, you have still far to go before you become an accurate thinker. Of course, much truth and many facts travel in the guise of idle gossip and newspaper reports, but the accurate thinker will not accept as such all that he sees and hears. This is a point which I feel impelled to emphasize, for the reason that it constitutes the rocks and reefs on which so many people flounder and go down to defeat in a bottomless ocean of false conclusions. In the realm of legal procedure, there is a principle which is called the law of evidence, and the object of this law is to get at the facts. Any judge can proceed with justice to all concerned if he has the facts upon which to base his judgment. But he may play havoc with innocent people if he circumvents the law of evidence and reaches a conclusion of judgment that is based upon hearsay information. The great Edison failed 10,000 times before he made the incandescent electric light work. Do not become discouraged and quit if you fail once or twice before making your plans work. The law of evidence varies according to the subject and circumstances with which it is used, but you will not go far wrong if, in the absence of that which you know to be the facts, you form your judgments on the hypothesis that only the part of the evidence before you which furthers your own interests without working any hardship on others is based upon facts. He italicizes without working any hardship on others. So once again, You form your judgments on the hypothesis that only that part of the evidence before you which furthers your own interests without working any hardship on others is based upon facts. He's telling you to interpret it through the filter of what you want in your world. This is very subtle. Going on to say, this is a crucial and important point in this lesson, therefore I wish to be sure that you do not pass it by lightly. Many a man mistakes, knowingly or otherwise, expediency for fact, doing a thing or refraining from doing it for the sole reason that his action furthers his own interest without consideration as to whether it interferes with the rights of others. No matter how regrettable it is true, the most thinking of today, far from being accurate, is based upon the sole foundation of expediency. It is amazing to the more advanced student of accurate thought how many people there are who are honest when it is profitable to them, but find myriads of facts to justify themselves in following a dishonest course when that course seems to be more profitable or advantageous. No doubt you know people who are like that. The accurate thinker adopts a standard by which he or she guides themselves, and they follow that standard at all times, whether it works always to his immediate advantage or carries him now and then through the fields of disadvantage, as it undoubtedly will. The accurate thinker deals with facts, regardless of how they affect his own interests, for he knows that ultimately this policy will bring him out on top, in full possession of the object of his definite chief aim in life. He understands the soundness of the philosophy that old philosopher Croesus had in mind when he said, "There is a wheel on which the affairs of men revolve, and its mechanism is such that it prevents any man from being always fortunate." The accurate thinker has but one standard by which he conducts himself in his intercourse with his fellow men, and that standard is observed by him as faithfully when it brings him temporary disadvantage as when it brings him outstanding advantage. For being an accurate thinker, he knows that by the law of averages, he will more than regain at some future time that which he loses by applying his standard to his own temporary detriment. You might as well begin to prepare yourself to understand that it requires the staunchest and most unshakable character to become an accurate thinker, for you can see that this is where the reasoning of this lesson is leading. There is a certain amount of temporary penalty attached to accurate thinking. There is no denying this fact. But while this is true, it is also true that the compensating reward in the aggregate is so overwhelmingly greater than you will gladly pay this penalty. In searching for facts, it is often necessary to gather them through the sole source of knowledge and experience of others. It then becomes necessary to examine carefully both the evidence submitted and the person from whom the evidence comes, and when the evidence is of such a nature that it affects the interest of the witness who is giving it, there will be reason to scrutinize it all the more carefully, as witnesses who have an interest in the evidence that they are submitting often yield to the temptation to color and pervert it to protect that interest. So we have right now a couple guidance points. The accurate thought involves two fundamentals which all who indulge must observe. First, to think accurately, you must separate facts from mere information, and that you must separate facts into two classes, important and unimportant, and then to evaluate the information and how it benefits you and how it benefits others as well. Hill explains that if one man slanders another, his remarks should be accepted, if of any weight at all, with at least a grain of the proverbial salt of caution. For it is a common human tendency for men to find nothing but evil in those whom they do not like. The man who has attained to the degree of accurate thinking that enables him to speak of his enemy without exaggerating his faults and minimizing his virtues is the exception and not the rule. Some very able men have not yet risen above this vulgar and self-destructive habit of belittling their enemies, competitors, and contemporaries. I wish to bring this common tendency to your attention with all possible emphasis because it is a tendency that is fatal to accurate thinking. Before you can become an accurate thinker, you must understand and make allowance for the fact that the moment a man or a woman begins to assume leadership in any walk of life, the slanderers begin to circulate rumors and subtle whisperings reflecting upon his or her character. No matter how fine one's character is, or what service he may be engaged in rendering to the world, he cannot escape the notice of those misguided people who delight in destroying instead of building. Lincoln's political enemies circulated the report that he lived with a colored woman. Washington's political enemies circulated a similar report concerning him. Since both Lincoln and Washington were Southern men, this report was undoubtedly regarded by those who circulated it as being at one and at the same time the most fitting and degrading one they could imagine. But we do not have to go back to our first president to find evidence of this slanderous nature with which men are gifted. For they went a step further in paying their tributes to the late President Harding and circulated the report that he too had African blood in his veins. When Woodrow Wilson came back from Paris with what he believed to be a sound plan for abolishing war and settling international disputes, all except the accurate thinker might have been led to believe by the reports of they say chorus that he was a combination of Nero and Judas Iscariot. The little politicians and the cheap politicians and the interest-paid politicians and the plain ignorance who did not think of their own all joined in one mighty chorus for the purpose of destroying the one and only man in the history of the world who offered a plan for abolishing war. The slanderers killed both Harding and Wilson, murdered them both with vicious lies. They did the same to Lincoln, only in a somewhat more spectacular manner by inciting a fanatic to hasten his death with a bullet. Statesmanship and politics are not the only fields in which the accurate thinker must be on guard against the they say chorus. The moment a man begins to make himself felt in the field of industry or business, this chorus becomes active. If a man makes a better mousetrap than his neighbor, the world will make a beaten path to his door. No doubt about that. And in the gang that will trail along will be those who come not to command but to condemn and to destroy his reputation. The late John H. Patterson, president of the National Cash Register Company, is a notable example of what may happen to a man who builds a better cash register than that of his neighbor. Yet in the mind of the accurate thinker, there is not one scintilla of evidence to support the vicious reports that Mr. Patterson's competitors circulated about him. As for Wilson and Harding, we may only judge how posterity will view them by observing how it was immortalized the names of Lincoln and Washington. Truth alone endures. All else must pass on with time. The object of these references is not to eulogize those who stand in no particular need of eulogy, but it is to direct your attention to the fact that they say evidence is always subject to the closest scrutiny, and all the more so when it is of negative or destructive nature. No harm can come from accepting as fact hearsay evidence that is constructive, but its opposite, if accepted at all, should be subjected to the closest inspection possible under the available means of applying the law of evidence. As an accurate thinker, it is both your privilege and your duty to avail yourself of facts, even though you must go out of your way to get them. If you permit yourself to be swayed to and fro by all manner of information that comes to your attention, you will never become an accurate thinker. And if you do not think accurately, you cannot be sure of attaining the object of your definite chief aim in life. You are well on the road to success if you have such a keen conception of life that you never build a plan which contemplates your requesting another person to do that which does not bring that person some corresponding advantage in return for compliance with your request. Many a man has gone down to defeat because, due to his prejudice and hatred, he underestimated the virtues of his enemies or competitors. The eyes of the accurate thinker see facts, not the delusions of prejudice, hate, and envy. An accurate thinker must be something of a good sportsman in that he is fair enough with himself, at least, to look for virtues as well as faults in other people, for it is not without reason to suppose that all men have some of each of these qualities. I do not believe that I can afford to deceive others. I know I cannot afford to deceive myself. This is a really good suggestion by Napoleon Hill. We have an idea that it is not accurate thinking when it's based upon prejudice or hate. And those things always lead to inaccurate thinking and to look for virtues in those who are seemingly your enemy. With that supposition that these hints are sufficient to impress upon your mind the importance of searching for facts until you are reasonably sure that you have found them, we will take up the question of organizing, classifying, and using these facts. Look once more in the circle of your own acquaintances and find a person who appears to accomplish more with less effort than do any of his associates. Study this man and you observe that he is a strategist and that he has learned how to arrange facts so that he brings to his aid the law of increasing returns, which we describe in a previous lesson. The man who knows that he is working with facts goes at his task with a feeling of self-confidence, which enables him to refrain from temporizing, hesitating, or waiting to make sure of his ground. He knows in advance what the outcome of his efforts will be. Therefore, he moves more rapidly and accomplishes more than does the man who must feel his way because he is not sure he is working with the facts. Once again, Napoleon Hill is also pointing out in interpreting facts, you interpret facts which aid you or benefits you. So you're actually not necessarily looking at facts in the way that you think of it. He goes on to say, the man who has learned the advantages of searching for facts as the foundation of his thinking has gone very long way toward the development of accurate thinking. But the man who has learned how to separate facts into the important and the unimportant has gone still further. The latter may be compared to the man who uses a trip hammer and thereby accomplishes at one blow more than the former, who uses a tack hammer, can accomplish with 10,000 blows. Let us analyze briefly a few men who have made it their business to deal with the important or relevant facts pertaining to their life work. If it were not for the fact that this course is being adapted to the practical needs of men and women of the present workaday world, we would go back to the great men of the past: Plato, Aristotle, Epictetus, Socrates, Solomon, Moses, and Christ, and direct attention to their habit of dealing with facts. However, we can find examples near our own generation that will serve our purpose to better advantage at this particular point. Inasmuch as this is an age in which money is looked upon as being the most concrete proof of success, let us study a man who has accumulated almost as much of it as has any other man in the history of the world, John D. Rockefeller. Mr. Rockefeller has one quality that stands out like a shining star above all of his other qualities. It is his habit of dealing only with the relevant facts pertaining to his life work. As a very young man, and a very poor young man at that, Mr. Rockefeller adopted as his definite chief aim the accumulation of great wealth. It is not my purpose, nor is it of any particular advantage, to enter into Mr. Rockefeller's method of accumulating his fortune other than to observe that his most pronounced quality was that of insisting on facts as the basis of his business philosophy. Some there are who say that Mr. Rockefeller was not always fair with his competitors. That may or may not be true, as accurate thinkers will leave the point undisturbed. But no one, not even his competitors, ever accused Mr. Rockefeller of forming snap judgments or of underestimating the strength of his competitors. He only recognized the facts that affected his business, wherever and whenever he found them. But he made it his business to search for them until he was sure he had found them. In the field of science, relevant facts are the tools with which men and women work. Mere information or hearsay evidence is of no value. Every time you press a button and switch on an electric light, remember that it was Mr. Edison's capacity for organizing relevant facts which made this possible. Hearsay evidence could never have produced the incandescent electric light, the phonograph, or the moving picture, and if it had, the phenomenon would have been an accident. In this lesson, we are trying to prepare the student to avoid accidents. The question now arises as to what constitutes an important and relevant fact. The answer depends entirely upon what constitutes your definite chief aim in life. For an important and relevant fact is any fact which you can use without interfering with the rights of others in the attainment of that purpose. All other facts, as far as you're concerned, are superfluous and of minor importance at most. However, you can work as hard in organizing, classifying, and using unimportant and irrelevant facts as you can in dealing with their opposites, but you will not accomplish as much. So once again, he is pointing out that you filter the information that's coming in around your definite chief aim. That is how you declare whether something's important or irrelevant. So if it's some conspiracy that has nothing to do with your business or your life or what your definite chief aim in life is, perhaps it's not important. Perhaps it's something that you can let go of. Up to this point, we've been discussing only one factor of accurate thought, and that is based on deductive reasoning. Perhaps this is the point at which some students will have to think along lines with which they are not familiar, for we come now to the discussion of thought, which doesn't much more than gather, organize, and combine facts. Let us call this creative thought. That you may understand why it is called creative thought, it is necessary briefly to study the process of evolution through which the thinking man has been created. Thinking man has been a long time on the road of evolution, and he has traveled a very long way. In the words of Judge Troward, in Bible Mystery and Bible Meaning, perfected man is the apex of the evolutionary pyramid, and this by a necessary sequence. Let us trace thinking man through the 5 evolutionary steps through which we believe he has traveled, beginning with the very lowest, namely 1, the mineral period, where we find life in its lowest form, lying motionless and inert, a mass of mineral substances with no power to move. 2, then comes the vegetable period. Here we find life in a more active form with intelligence sufficient to gather food, grow, and reproduce, but still unable to move from its fixed moorings. And 3, then it comes the animal period. Here we find life in a still higher and more intelligent form with ability to move from place to place. And 4, then comes the human or thinking man period, where we find life in its highest known form, the highest because man can think, and because thought is the highest known form of organized energy. In the realm of thought, man knows no limitations. He can send his thoughts to the stars with the quickness of a flash of lightning. He can gather facts and assemble them in new and varying combinations. He can create hypotheses and translate them into physical reality through thought. He can reason both inductively and deductively. 5, then comes the spiritual period. On this plane, the lower forms of life described in the previously mentioned 4 periods converge and become infinitude in nature. At this point, thinking man has unfolded, expanded, and grown until he has projected his thinking ability into infinite intelligence. As yet, thinking man is but an infant in this 5th period, for he has not learned how to appropriate to his own use this infinite intelligence called spirit. Moreover, with a few rare exceptions, man has not yet recognized thought as the connecting link which gives him access to the power of infinite intelligence. These exceptions have been such men as Moses, Solomon, Christ, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Confucius, and a comparatively small number of others of their type. Since their time, we have had many who partly uncovered this great truth. Yet the truth itself is as available now as it was then. Here, we have Napoleon Hill literally talking about the different densities of consciousness, going from 1st, 2nd, 3rd to 4th density within these 5 different steps of evolution. Going on in discussing creative thought, Hill explains to make use of creative thought, one must work very largely on faith, which is the chief reason why more of us do not indulge in this sort of thought. The most ignorant of the race can think in terms of deductive reasoning in connection with matters of a purely physical and material nature, but to go a step higher and think in terms of infinite intelligence is another question. The average man is totally at sea the moment he gets beyond that which he can comprehend with the aid of his 5 physical senses of seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, and tasting. Infinite intelligence works through none of these agencies, and we cannot invoke its aid through any of them. How then may one appropriate the power of infinite intelligence is but a natural question, and the answer is through creative thought. To make clear the exact manner in which this is done, I will now call your attention to some of the preceding lessons of this course, through which you have been prepared to understand the meaning of creative thought. In the second lesson, and to some extent in practically every other lesson that followed up to this one, you have observed the frequent introduction of the autosuggestion. We now come back to that term again because autosuggestion is the telegraph line, so to speak, over which you may register in your subconscious mind a description or plan of that which you wish to create or acquire in physical form. It is a process you can easily learn to use. So here we have Napoleon Hill talking about using autosuggestion to speak to the subconscious, which has access to infinite intelligence or intelligent infinity. And he's also explaining why creative thought is God, is the spirit, is the spiritual period. And that's the same thing Neville Goddard is saying. The subconscious mind, he says, is the intermediary between the conscious thinking mind and infinite intelligence. And you can invoke the aid of infinite intelligence only through the medium of the subconscious mind, by giving it clear instructions as to what you want. Here you become familiar with the psychological reason for a definite chief aim. If you have not already seen the importance of creating a definite chief aim as the object of your life work, you will undoubtedly do so before this lesson shall have been mastered. Knowing from my own experience as a beginner in the study of this and related subjects, how little I understood such terms as subconscious mind and autosuggestion and creative thought, I have taken the liberty throughout this course of describing these terms through every conceivable simile and illustration with the object of making their meaning and the methods of their application so clear that no student of this course can possibly fail to understand. This accounts for the repetition of terms which you will observe throughout the course, and at the same time serves as an apology to those students who have already advanced far enough to grasp the meaning of much that the beginner will not understand at first reading. The subconscious mind has one outstanding characteristic to which I will now direct your attention, namely, it records the suggestions which you send it through autosuggestion, and invokes the aid of infinite intelligence in translating these suggestions into their natural physical form through natural means, which are in no way out of the ordinary. If it is important that you understand the foregoing sentence, for if you fail to understand it, you are likely to fail. Also to understand the importance of the very foundation upon which this entire course is built, that foundation being the principle of infinite intelligence, which may be reached and appropriated at will through aid of the law of the mastermind. Study carefully, thoughtfully, and with meditation the entire preceding paragraph. So what we have here is that we can access infinite intelligence and the mastermind when multiple other people are coming together for the same purpose and thought. He's talking about a social memory complex being formed at the very basic level. This chapter is so much the law of one built into it. It's amazing. And he says, study carefully, thoughtfully, and with meditation the entire preceding paragraph, pointing out that there's something deeper to it. And he puts in italics that foundation being the principle of infinite intelligence is the entire course of the law of success that he built around this. The subconscious mind has another outstanding characteristic, he says. It accepts and acts upon all suggestions that reach it, whether they are constructive or destructive, and whether they come from the outside or from your own conscious mind. You can see, therefore, how essential it is for you to observe the law of evidence and carefully follow the principles laid down in the beginning of this lesson, in the selection of that which you will pass on to your subconscious mind through autosuggestion. You can see why one must search diligently for facts, and why one cannot afford to lend a receptive ear to the slanderer and the scandalmonger, for to do so is the equivalent of feeding the subconscious mind with food that is poison and ruinous to creative thought. The subconscious mind may be likened to the sensitive plate of a camera on which the picture of any object placed before the camera will be recorded. The plate of the camera does not choose the sort of picture to be recorded on it. It records anything which reaches it through the lens. The conscious mind may be likened to the shutter which shuts off the light from the sensitized plate, permitting nothing to reach the plate for record except that which the operator wishes to reach it. The lens of the camera may be likened to autosuggestion, for it is the medium that carries the image of the object to be registered. To the sensitized plate of the camera, and infinite intelligence may be likened to the one who develops the sensitized plate after a picture has been recorded on it, thus bringing the picture into physical reality. Here he is explaining that the secret to creating your pictures into physical reality comes through infinite intelligence. The ordinary camera is a splendid instrument with which to compare the whole process of creative thought. First comes the selection of the object to be exposed before the camera. This represents one's definite chief aim in life. Then comes the actual operation of recording a clear outline of that purpose through the lens of autosuggestion on the sensitized plate of the subconscious mind. Here, infinite intelligence steps in and develops the outline of that purpose in a physical form appropriate to the nature of the purpose. The part which you must play is clear. You select the picture to be recorded. That is your definite chief aim. Then you fix your conscious mind upon this purpose with such intensity that it communicates with the subconscious mind through autosuggestion and registers that picture. You then begin to watch for and to expect manifestations of physical realization of the subject of that picture. Bear in mind the fact that you do not sit down and wait, nor do you go to bed and sleep with the expectation of awaking to find that infinite intelligence has showered you with the object of your definite chief aim. You go right ahead in the usual way, doing your daily work in accordance with the instructions laid down in Lesson 9 of this course, with full faith and confidence that natural ways and means for the attainment of the object of your definite purpose will open to you at the proper time and in a suitable manner. The way may not open suddenly, from the first step to the last, but it may open one step at a time. Therefore, when you are conscious of an opportunity to take the first step, take it without hesitation, and do the same when the second and third and all the subsequent steps essential for the attainment of the object of your definite chief aim are manifested to you. Any man may become great by doing the commonplace things of life in a great spirit, with a genuine desire to be of helpful service to others, regardless of his calling. Infinite intelligence will not build you a home and deliver that home to you, ready to enter, but infinite intelligence will open the way and provide the necessary means with which you may build your own house. Infinite intelligence will not command the cashier of your bank to place a definite sum of money to your credit just because you suggested this to your subconscious mind, but infinite intelligence will open to you the way in which you may earn or borrow that money and place it in your own credit. Infinite intelligence will not throw out the present incumbent of the White House and make you president in his place, but infinite intelligence would most likely proceed under the proper circumstances to influence you to prepare yourself to fill that position with credit and then help you to attain it through the regular method of procedure. Do not rely upon the performance of miracles for the attainment of the object of your definite chief aim. Rely upon the power of infinite intelligence to guide you through natural channels and with the aid of natural laws for its attainment. Do not expect infinite intelligence to bring it to you, the object of your definite chief aim. Instead, expect infinite intelligence to direct you toward the object. As a beginner, do not expect infinite intelligence to move quickly in your behalf. But as you become more adept in the use of the principle of autosuggestion, and as you develop the faith and understanding required for its quick realization, you can create a definite chief aim and witness its immediate translation into physical reality. You did not walk the first time you tried. But now as an adult, an adept at walking, you walk without effort. You also look down at the little child as it wobbles around trying to walk and laugh at its efforts. As a beginner in the use of creative thought, you may be compared to the little child who is learning to take its first step. I have the best of reasons for knowing that this comparison is accurate, but I will not state them. I will let you find out your own reason in your own way. Keep in mind always the principle of evolution, through the operation of which everything physical is eternally reaching upward and trying to complete the cycle between finite and infinite intelligences. Man himself is the highest and most noteworthy example of the working of the principle of evolution. First, we find him down in the minerals of the earth, where there is life but no intelligence. Next, we find him raised through the growth of vegetation, evolution, to a much higher form of life, where he enjoys sufficient intelligence to feed himself. Next, we find him functioning in the animal period, where he has comparatively high degree of intelligence with the ability to move around from place to place. And lastly, we find him risen above the lower species of the animal kingdom, to where he functions as a thinking entity with ability to appropriate and use infinite intelligence. Observe that he did not reach this high state all at one bound. He climbed step by step, perhaps through many reincarnations. This is the first time I remember Napoleon Hill mentioning reincarnation. Very brief, but it's an interesting thing to note. He says, "Keep this in mind, and you will understand why you cannot reasonably expect infinite intelligence to circumvent the natural laws and turn man into the storehouse of all knowledge and all power, until he has prepared himself to use this knowledge and power with higher than finite intelligence." If you want a fair example of what may happen to a man who suddenly comes into control of power, study some newly rich or someone who has inherited a fortune. Money power in the hands of John D. Rockefeller is not only in safe hands, but it is in hands where it is serving mankind throughout the world, blotting out ignorance, destroying contagious disease, and serving in 1,000 other ways of which the average individual knows nothing. But place John D. Rockefeller's fortune in the hands of some young lad who has not yet finished high school, and you may have another story to tell, the details of which your own imagination and your knowledge of human nature will supply. If you have ever done any farming, you understand that certain preparations are necessary before a crop can be produced from the ground. You know, of course, that grain will not grow in the woods, that it requires sunshine and rain for its growth. Likewise, you understand that the farmer must plow the soil and properly plant the grain. After all this has been done, he then waits on nature to do her share of the work, and she does it in due time without outside help. This is a perfect simile, which illustrates the method through which one may attain the object of one's definite chief aim. First comes the preparing of the soil to receive the seed, which is represented by faith and infinite intelligence, and understanding of the principle of autosuggestion and the subconscious mind through which the seed of a definite purpose may be planted. Then comes a period of waiting and working for the realization of the object of that purpose. During this period, there must be continuous, intensified faith, which serves as the sunshine and the rain, without which the seed will wither and die in the ground. Then comes realization, harvest time, and a wonderful harvest can be brought forth. I am fully conscious of the fact that much of that which I am stating will not be understood by the beginner at the first reading, for I have in my mind my own experiences at the start. However, as the evolutionary process carries on its work, and it will do so, make no mistake about this, all the principles described in this and in all other lessons of this course will become as familiar to you as did the multiplication table after you had mastered it. And what is of greater importance still, these principles will work with the same unvarying certainty as does the principle of multiplication. In this lesson, you are dealing with 4 major factors to which I would again direct your attention with the request that you familiarize yourself with them. Autosuggestion, the subconscious mind, creative thought, and infinite intelligence. These are the 4 roadways over which you must travel in your upward climb in quest of knowledge. Observe that you control 3 of these. Observe also, and this is especially emphasized, that upon the manner in which you traverse these 3 roadways will depend the time and place at which they will converge into the 4th or infinite intelligence. So autosuggestion, subconscious mind, and creative thought together. You understand what it meant by the terms of autosuggestion and subconscious mind. Let us make sure that you understand also what is meant by the term creative thought. This means thought of a positive, non-destructive, creative nature. The object of our lesson on self-control was to prepare you to understand and successfully apply the principle of creative thought. If you have not mastered that lesson, you are not ready to make use of creative thought in the attainment of your definite chief aim. Let me repeat a simile already used by saying that your subconscious mind is the field or the soil in which you sow the seed of your definite chief aim. Creative thought is the instrument with which you keep that soil fertilized and conditioned to awaken that seed into growth and maturity. Your subconscious mind will not germinate the seed of your definite chief aim, nor will infinite intelligence translate that purpose into physical reality if you fill your mind with hatred and envy and jealousy and selfishness and greed. These negative or destructive thoughts are the weeds which will choke out the seeds of your definite purpose. So to repeat, if you are suffering from any of these lines of thinking, they are detracting from your ability to create the reality that you want. Do you have hatred? Do you have envy or jealousy or selfishness or greed? If you have any of these elements, they are choking out your progress towards your definite chief aim. Hill says, remember that your real wealth can be measured not by what you have, but by what you are. Creative thought presupposes that you will keep your mind in a state of expectancy of attainment of the object of your definite chief aim, that you will have full faith and confidence in its attainment in due course and in due order. If this lesson does that which it was intended to do, it will bring you a fuller and deeper realization of our lesson on self-confidence, as you begin to learn how to plant the seed of your desires in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind, and how to fertilize that seed until it springs into life and action. You will then have reason indeed to believe in yourself. And after you've reached this point in the process of your evolution, you will have sufficient knowledge of the real source from which you are drawing your power to give full credit to infinite intelligence for all that you had previously credited to your self-confidence. Autosuggestion is a powerful weapon with which one may rise to heights of great achievement when it is used constructively. Used in a negative manner, however, it may destroy all possibility of success, and if so used continuously, it will destroy your health. Napoleon Hill goes on to give examples of hypochondriacs who think negatively through autosuggestion, really destroying their own health. He explains that imagination will kill a cat, so runs the old adage. It certainly will kill a man, or on the other hand, it will help him rise to heights of achievement of the most astounding nature, providing he uses it as the basis of self-confidence. There are authentic cases on record of men having actually died because they imagined they were cut by a knife across the jugular vein, when in reality a piece of ice was used and water was allowed to drip so they could hear it and imagine their blood was running out. They had been blindfolded before the experiment was begun. No matter how well you may be when you start for work in the morning, if everyone you meet should say to you how ill you look, you should see a doctor. It will not be long before you begin to feel ill, and if this keeps up a few hours, you will arrive at home in the evening as limp as a rag and ready for a doctor. The imaginative faculty of the human mind is a marvelous piece of mental machinery, but it may, and usually does, play tricks on us unless we keep constantly on guard and control it. If you allow your imagination to expect the worst, it will play havoc with you. Young medical students not infrequently become frightened and believe that they have every disease on the medical calendar as the result of medical lectures and classroom discussions of the various diseases. The mind may be cured of imaginary ills in exactly the same manner that it became diseased with those ills by autosuggestion. The best time to work on a faulty imagination is at night, just as you are ready to go to sleep, for then the automatic or subconscious mind has everything its own way, and the thoughts or suggestions you give it, just as your conscious or day mind is about to go off duty, will be taken up and worked on during the night. This may seem impossible. You can easily test the principle by the following procedure. You wish to get up at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning or at some other hour than your regular time to awaken. Say to yourself as you're about ready to go to sleep, I must arise at 7 o'clock tomorrow without fail. Repeat this several times, at the same time impressing the fact upon your mind that you must actually arise at the precise moment mentioned. Turn this thought over to your subconscious mind with absolute confidence that you will awaken at 7 o'clock, and when that hour arrives, your subconscious mind will awaken you. This test has been successfully made hundreds of times. Likewise, the subconscious mind may be given any other sort of orders. It will carry them out as readily as it will awaken you at a given hour. For example, give the command as you're about to go to sleep each night for your subconscious mind to develop self-confidence, courage, initiative, or any other quality. It will do your bidding. If the imagination of man can create imaginary ills and send one to bed with those ills, it can also, and just as easily, remove the cause of those ills. Man is a combination of chemical equivalents, the value of which is said to be about $26, with the exception, of course, of that stupendous power called the human mind. In the aggregate, the mind seems to be a complicated machine, but in reality, as far as the manner in which it may be used is concerned, it is the nearest thing to perpetual motion that is known. It works automatically when we are asleep. It works both automatically and in conjunction with the will or voluntary section when we are awake. The mind is deserving of the minutest possible analysis in this lesson because the mind is the energy with which all thinking is done. To learn how to think accurately, the teaching of which is the sole object of this lesson, one must thoroughly understand first that the mind can be controlled, guided, and directed to creative, constructive ends. Second, that the mind can be directed to destructive ends, and that it may voluntarily tear down and destroy unless it is with plan and deliberation controlled and directed constructively. Third, that the mind has power over every cell of the body and can be made to cause every cell to do its intended work perfectly, or it may, through neglect or wrong direction, destroy the normal functionary purposes of any or all cells. Fourth, that all achievement of man is the result of thought, the part which his physical body plays being of secondary importance, and in many instances of no importance whatsoever except as a housing place for the mind. Fifth, that the greatest of all achievements, whether in literature, art, finance, industry, commerce, transportation, religions, politics, or scientific discoveries, are usually the result of ideas conceived in one man's brain, but actually transformed into reality by other men through the combined use of their minds and bodies. Meaning that the conception of an idea is of greater importance than the transformation of that idea into more material form. Because relatively few men can conceive useful ideas, while there are hundreds of millions who can develop an idea and give it material form after it has been conceived. 6. The majority of all thoughts conceived in the minds of men are not accurate, being more in the nature of opinions or snap judgments. When Alexander the Great cited because he had no more worlds as he believed it could be conquered, he was in a frame of mind similar to that of the present-day Alexanders of science, industry, invention, etc., whose accurate thoughts have conquered the air and sea, explored practically every square mile of the little earth on which we live, and wrested from nature thousands of secrets, which a few generations ago would have been set down as miracles of the most astounding and imponderable sort. In all this discovery, and mastery of mere physical substances, is it not strange indeed that we have practically neglected and overlooked the most marvelous of all powers, the human mind? All scientific men who have made a study of the human mind readily agree on this, that the surface has not yet been scratched in the study of this wonderful power which lies dormant in the mind of man, waiting as the oak tree sleeps in the acorn to be aroused and put to work. Those who have expressed themselves on the subject are the opinion that the next great cycle of discovery lies in the realm of the human mind. The possible nature of these discoveries has been suggested in many different ways in practically every lesson of this course, particularly in this and the following lessons. If these suggestions appear to lead the student of this philosophy into deeper water, then he or she is accustomed to bear in mind the fact that the student has the privilege of stopping at any depth desired until ready, through thought and study, to go further. The author of this course has found it necessary to take the lead and keep far enough ahead, as it were, to induce the student to go at least a few paces ahead of the normal average range of human thought. It is not expected that any beginner will at first try to assimilate and put it into use all that has been included in this philosophy. But if the net result of the course is nothing more than to sow the seed of constructive thought in the mind of the student, the author's work will have been complete. Time, plus the student's own desire for knowledge, will do the rest. We have discovered that the body of man is not singular, but plural, and that it consists of billions on top of billions of living, intelligent individual cells which carry on a very definite, well-organized work of building, developing, and maintaining the human body. We've discovered that these cells are directed in their respective duties by the subconscious or automatic action of the mind, that the subconscious section of the mind can be, to a very large extent, controlled and directed by the conscious or voluntary section of the mind. We have found that any idea or thought which is held in the mind through repetition has a tendency to direct the physical body to transform such a thought or idea into its material equivalent. We have found that any order that is properly given to the subconscious section of the mind will be carried out unless it is sidetracked or countermanded by another and stronger order. We have found that the subconscious mind does not question the source from which it receives orders, nor the soundness of those orders, but it will proceed direct the muscular system of the body to carry out any order it receives. This explains the necessity for guarding closely the environment from which we receive suggestions, and by which we are subtly and quietly influenced at times, and in ways of which we do not organize and take cognizance through the conscious mind. We have found that every movement of the human body is directed by these conscious or the subconscious section of the mind, that not a muscle can be moved until an order has been sent out by one or the other of these two sections of the mind for the movement. Later in the chapter, Hill has a exercise he recommends to write out a clear, concise statement of that which you intend to accomplish as your definite chief aim, covering a period of, let us say, the next 5 years. Make at least 2 copies of your statement, one to be placed where you can read it several times a day while you're at work, and the other to be placed in the room where you sleep, where it can be read several times each evening before you go to bed and just after you arise in the morning. The suggestive influence of this procedure, impractical though it may seem, will soon impress the object of your definite chief aim on your subconscious mind, as if by a stroke of magic. You will begin to observe events taking place which will lead you nearer and nearer the attainment of that object. This part's important. He says, from the very day that you reach a definite decision in your own mind as to the precise thing, condition, or position in your life that you deeply desire, you will observe, if you read books, newspapers, and magazines, that important news items and other data bearing on the object of your definite chief aim will begin to come to your attention. You will observe also that opportunities will begin to come to you that will be, if embraced, lead you to nearer and nearer the coveted goal of your desire. No one knows better than the author of this course how impossible and impractical this may seem to the person who is not informed on the subject of mind operation. However, this is not an age favorable to the doubter or the skeptic, and the best thing for any person to do is to experiment with this principle until its practicality has been established. To the present generation, it may seem that there are no more worlds to conquer in the field of mechanical invention, but every thinker will concede that we are just entertaining a new era of evolution, experiment, and analysis as far as the powers of the human mind are concerned. The word impossible means less now than ever before in the history of the human race. There are some who have actually removed this word from their vocabularies, believing that man can do anything he can imagine and believe he can do. We've learned for sure that the universe is made up of two substances, matter and energy. Through patient scientific research, we have discovered that we believe to be good evidence that everything that is or ever has been in the way of matter, when analyzed to the finest point, can be traced back to the electron, which is nothing but a form of energy. On the other hand, every material thing that man has created began in the form of energy, through the seed of an idea that it was released through the imaginative faculty of the human mind. In other words, the beginning of every material thing is energy, and ending of it is energy. All matter obeys the command of one form or another of energy. The highest form of energy is that which functions as the human mind. The human mind, therefore, is the sole directing force of everything man creates, and what he may create with this force in the future, as compared with that which he has created within the past, will make his past achievements seem petty and small. We do not have to wait for future discoveries in connection with the powers of the human mind for evidence that the mind is the greatest force known to mankind. We know now that any idea, aim, or purpose that is fixed in the mind and held there with the will to achieve or attain its physical or material equivalent puts into motion powers that cannot be conquered. Thoughts are things. This is a great truth which, when you understand it, will bring you as close to the door of the secret passageway to knowledge previously mentioned as is possible for another person to bring you. When you grasp this fundamental truth, you will soon find that door and open it. Hill goes on to conclude at the end of the lesson that the mastermind is the principle through which you may become an accurate thinker, mentioning the mastermind several times through this chapter. So we learn some things that may be relevant to present day. Remember, this is written during the Depression, a long time ago, 100 years ago. But it's always relevant because it's part of a discussion of human nature. I, in my own lifetime, remember a time when there was not the internet. I know I'm that old, but I do. I remember when there was first a microwave. We had microwaves and we used it because we had not had a microwave before. I remember the first computer before they were connected by the internet. I remember my Apple, my Texas Instruments. I remember my Commodore 64. I remember all of this. Information has changed as we've gone along. I remember reading the newspaper to get the scores of basketball games because we didn't have ESPN. The only way I knew of the scores of the games was by reading the newspaper every day. So I'd follow baseball in that way. We're getting more information now from a variety of sources. And unfortunately, we've reached a point where it appears that there's a section of our world that will believe anything they see. If it's in repetition, they'll believe anything that they see. There's a lot of people out there that have a confirmation bias. They only look at information that supports their own theory. And as I've previously said, hey, maybe that's what he's advising us to do. So there's a definite paradox here. Because we see people that are unable to see the truth. So there's a form of accurate thinking where you can evaluate what's going on in the world, and you avoid gossip. You avoid anything that induces jealousy, fear, envy, hate, all those negative emotions. And if you hear people talking about on social media, they say references to some disparate group that's gossip, then you can filter that information. Really, when you get deep into this chapter, he is giving you, if you take a greater look at it, a way of looking at the world. You're creating a definite chief aim, and that becomes the focus of your life. And then you're not just reacting to the news that you get because you're naturally watching TV or getting the news. You're actively focused on the information around you, opening yourself up to this amazing possibility that your thought is bringing you through infinite intelligence, as discussed by Napoleon Hill. It's guiding you. It's guiding you, and you're going to find information that guides you towards this definite chief aim. The key is the filter. You're filtering the world around you, looking for what it is you're focused on. Don't get caught up in stuff that's important and unimportant. At the beginning, he gives an important clue to this. So when you're filtering information, and if you're reading stuff that's gone viral, that's irrelevant, or stuff that's unimportant, learn to evaluate the information that you're getting and place its importance. Know what it's important. When you're getting an article or you're reading something or a speech, don't just assume because it's on your side that it's right. At the same time, observe the person that's talking, and if they have a particular interest, then you need to evaluate it secondarily because they are actually trying to further their own thought or goal. And so what they're saying is not accurate. And this happens in all of politics. I highly recommend in this day and age, if you can, get a subscription to newspapers. Join News Now on Apple so you can get a variety of different subscriptions, because it appears that there's a separation in this particular world now where we have one particular source of information that's free, and oftentimes it's not accurate. And then we have paid subscription for newspapers like New York Times and Washington Post, which actually have a lot more accurate and better journalism and information. But everybody's getting so much of the free information and they're being told that that information over there is bad, that they misjudge it. If you actually read the newspaper, there's so much more information about stuff, about military operations, about financial situations, about events that are happening in the world than you get when you read more generalized news information. You should be open up to multiple varieties of information that you get, not just relying on one source of information, even when it's reliably accurate, because you're looking for information that guides you along your path. And if it's not important, you disregard it. If it's a conspiracy, if it's degrading, if it's hateful, a lot of times some sources of information have used very, very natural human trigger points, scaring you oftentimes, as they did in World War II, with talking about the blood of children being consumed as a form of conspiracy. Oftentimes, a technique that's used to manipulate you is they will derive from children being tortured or taken as slaves, even when this is a real issue, and they've distracted from people dealing with the real issue. Look at the information that you're getting. What is the source of it? Where are they getting the information from? How does it affect you? Is it important to you? Evaluate it. Don't be afraid of getting information, because things are going to become more complex. Accept the complexity of the world. He's mentioning autosuggestion in a chapter on accurate thought, because you're also impressing upon your mind the reality of the world by the information that you're getting. So you have to be selective with what you get. If it's helpful and important, you'll get better and better at it as you access information. You can't be afraid of it, but you need to be suggesting a pattern in your mind that's more positive through creative thought, as he mentions later on in the chapter. Emphasizing creative thought and autosuggestion in a chapter on accurate thought. You have to look at what's relevant, what's not relevant, and you have to evaluate it through a filter. Does it damage other people, or does this just help you? If it's expedient just for you, as he exclaims earlier on in the chapter, you might get something that you want early on, but if it's not in the best interest of all, it'll hurt you later on. And he's saying over time, you'll learn that if you filter the information that you're getting, and if it's helpful to others, and it's not hurting others, then you can use it to help you along the way. I found this chapter to be very relevant, an early impression of the law of one. You can tell that He was divinely inspired in his writings, and I found a lot of it to be much deeper than what you get in Think and Grow Rich. And it's an example on why The Law of Success is such an amazing book and going at such a deeper level. It's surprising that this was the first book and not the second one that was the more popular by Napoleon Hill. In any case, you can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.